A lot of people skip straight to the how, and they just dig right into like how they're going to solve a problem and make decisions about what's the best how. But they're skipping over thought and discussion around the why and the what. And so those are much more critical to consider as inputs to the decision, because it will drastically change the how. This is like kind of our framework that we use and teach people that join us as tech leaders, and something that goes into like how we're able to make these good decisions by really anchoring everything into the business case. My name is Todd Larsen. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Tech Leader Institute.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries who share in the critical moments of what it takes to change an industry and build and lead a team that has your back. I'm your host, Noah Laphart, and today how Todd Larsen set out to create his consultancy to be like the AWS for engineering teams. All this and more on Code Story. From the time he was very young, Todd Larsen was always interested in tech. However, he ended up studying audio engineering, so he found his way to tech through teaching himself how to code. Outside of tech, he's a father to a 5-year-old daughter and a musician, which both things occupy his time outside of his business. Having gained fantastic experience in the advertising space at Groupon and then at Digit, he learned how to execute on longer-term initiatives, but balanced with fast delivery on top of strong foundations. All of this experience was hard-fought, and as he started consulting, he thought, how can I scale myself? This is the creation story of tech leaders.
My background is, I started in the advertising space, so building like lots of products quickly. In advertising, it's all about kind of short-lived apps and stuff that are like campaign-based. And so got a lot of experience of like how to build quickly and build the right thing at the right time to move fast in the advertising space. And then I went into the product world at Groupon. And that's where I kind of learned how to do longer term operations and how to really maintain things over time at scale with lots of stakeholders and that sort of complexity. How to effectively manage and what are some of the traits of, particular leaders in the organization that got the most done. I took that forward when I joined Digit, which is one of the fintech financial health companies that was kind of earlier in the space. They just recently got acquired by Opportune. And I was there for almost 8 years and helped it go from nothing, no monetization model at all, to about 100 people when I left. And over that time, I had to learn a ton more about how to get first versions of products shipped to production, how to integrate those in, all the typical things you'd expect with a fast-growing startup. And I had to learn it the hard way. And it took a long time to really just build all that from scratch. Since I left Digit, I've been doing a lot of consulting for various early stage startups. And across the board, they're always looking for this sort of early stage founding engineer, CTO, whatever you want to call it, that first technical perspective that's going to be able to make the right decisions early on to set a strong foundation for the startup. And so what we've done with tech leaders is actually, clone myself essentially. So my answer to these people is I can only do so much at one time. So how can I scale what I've learned as that early stage startup founding engineer to be able to help other companies do it a lot faster and do the same thing? One way to think of it is AWS and Heroku made it so startups didn't need to spend a lot of time standing up new servers and managing all that. It became kind of click of a button, infrastructure out of the box. We want to think of it the same way as that for the engineering org. So helping staff the team immediately with a kind of consistent, healthy engineering culture that we know works, specific ways of working, kind of a modified agile methodology. All these things that you kind of take for granted at a bigger company that is honed over a long period of time, we can stand that up for companies right away to make sure they can ship really good products a lot faster.
It'll be interesting to ask this question because typically, I'm interviewing, SaaS founders or software creators, which you are, but it's not exactly what you're doing here. But I'm going to ask, tell me about, the MVP for tech leaders, that first version of, what you have created. It'll be interesting to ask this too. How long did it take you to build? And what sort of tools did you use to bring what you have today to life?
The MVP really started with me needing to scratch an itch after leaving Digit. I wanted to just build something from scratch all over again. And so I kind of went back to basics of like, what is the best technical stack, best in class right now? And that's something that over the course of my career I've consistently stayed on the edge of like, what are the best technologies to continue building and to bet on for these companies that are going forward. I started with just like building a new micro SaaS out of this stack. And so that was a lot of fun because the goal was to just launch that and get it to generate revenue as quickly as possible. So I hit $1,000 MRR in 30 days of launching it. That was kind of the spark of like, oh, I could lead this one product, but what if I could do many, many more? And so I started to take on clients to help them bring their MVPs to life as quickly as possible with a really good tech stack. There's kind of all the best practices that have been learned over time. At that point, I reached kind of a max, saying like, okay, I can only do so many of these at a given time. Now, how do I clone myself, so to speak, and do that through training and recruiting, starting with just people in my network who are other really great technical leaders that I know that were CTOs at other early stage startups that could help come in and kind of continue to build out. It's like productized engineering is the best way to think of it.
When you're building any sort of MVP, right, or any sort of first version of a product, process, or team, you got to make certain decisions and trade-offs about what you're going to start with, right? Tell me about some of those you had to work through and how you coped with those decisions.
Decision making is one of the key things that we pride ourselves on, and I think a lot of people talk about making good decisions, but not a lot of clarity about what that actually means or what that looks like and how to do it on a repeatable way. And so I think for us, it's about looking at all the various inputs to a decision and then also understanding what are the consequences and outputs of the options. What that looks like is, to give you an example, is a lot of people skip straight to the how, and they just dig right into like how they're going to solve a problem and make decisions about what's the best how. But they're skipping over thought and discussion around the why and the what. And so those are much more critical to consider as inputs to the decision because it will drastically change the how. This is like kind of our framework that we use and teach people that join us as tech leaders, and something that goes into like how we're able to make these good decisions by really anchoring everything into the business case. One of the biggest problems is when engineering veers away from product or business if it's not tightly integrated always. And so this decision-making framework really keeps that tight.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. And obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors. But they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. And that's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups like yours get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. How, you ask? Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. And the platform connects you with trusted VCSOs to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. Join over 8,000 companies, including many Y Combinator and Techstars startups who trust Vanta. Simplify compliance and get $1,000 off at vanta.com/codestory. That's VANTA.com/codestory. This episode is sponsored by Kinsta. Between juggling client meetings, managing your website, and keeping up with everyday tasks, who has the time to stress out about website security? Well, with Kinsta, the technical stuff is taken care of, so you can focus on what you do best. Kinsta provides managed hosting for WordPress, offering lightning-fast load times, top-tier security, and unmatched human-only customer support. Whether you're a business owner, web developer, or running a digital agency, Kinsta makes managing your website easy and efficient. Kinsta provides enterprise-grade security, being one of the few hosting providers for WordPress with SOC 2 and other certifications, guaranteeing the highest level of security for your website. Thanks to their unlimited free expert-led migrations, Kinsta ensures a smooth transition for you from other hosting providers. Customers have reported 200% faster load times post-migration to their platform. What I find cool about Kinsta is their fast and reliable customer service and premium features that are included at no extra cost. Ready to experience Kinsta's hosting for yourself? Get your first month free when you sign up at kinsta.com today. That's KINSTA.com. Okay, so from that point, you've got your decision-making framework, right? You've got your what we're calling MVP. How did you progress, tech leaders from there? How did you mature it? And how are you thinking about, what we might say roadmap, right, for a different type of product, but how are you thinking about what is the next most important thing to address, add, or build for tech leaders?
We've had some of the best luck where we're able to partner with either a venture capital studio or product studio of some kind of an incubator of sorts, where there's some benefit to standardizing the process and the software development lifecycle across a number of companies at one time. So we've helped a couple of VCs sort of overhaul a number of their portfolio companies where it felt like the engineering was not moving as quickly as it could. Some other sorts of smells of a problem. We're able to come in and help turn that around, so to speak, through augmentation and training of the existing team, or in some cases, replacing altogether if they're struggling to hire, or the old, outsourcing firm is not working as expected. Where we go from here, it really comes down to this is a merging of done for you, actual output and delivery, but also the training. And I think that's where we really scale and invest further, where we're able to create a standard for the people side of things. A lot of companies have different ways of doing it, and they always say people leave a startup or a company because of the manager, right? Not the company. And so we really put an emphasis on what is a good way to lead and manage so that it's an attraction and not a repellent.
How did you go about building your team? And this may fit into what you've said already, but how are you building your team? And I'm curious, and focusing on the management aspect and really even beyond that, what do you look for in these people to indicate that they're the winning horses to join you?
Fortunately, I've got a really great network from both the more Silicon Valley tech scene, but also the Chicago scene, because I spent a number of years there too. We've gotten really good at how we can plug in fractional talent. So taking a subject matter expert that is maybe really great at some element of machine learning and actually plug them into a project at a very fractional, part-time, hourly way so that they can kind of dip their toes into consulting in a safe way, kind of moonlighting. And we're able to get that kind of just-in-time subject matter expertise when we need it. And so we work with that. That's kind of how we start and pull people in. The more we work with people in that capacity, the more they want to work with us full-time because they see what we're doing and enjoy the process and enjoy working with us. So it just becomes this kind of natural upgrade path for them to come on more full-time. So a lot of it is word of mouth and network right now. But the more we talk about what we do, the more that becomes magnetic for people to want to get on our wait list to either join the training program and become a tech leader, or to be one of the startups that we're able to take on and work with directly as a partner long-term, since there's only limited capacity there. But you can see how both sides kind of feed into each other, and we're able to grow kind of both sides of that marketplace.
So let's flip to scalability. And right on your website, it says, building scalable products and teams for early stage startups, right? So scaling is obviously in your DNA, but did it start that way? Did you create this to scale efficiently from day one, or have you been fighting this as you've grown and gained traction?
The outcomes that we help deliver are big, full-on delivered products that have a lot of moving pieces and complexities. And so because of that difficulty and that challenge, I think it scales more slowly than something that is pure software based. there becomes a ton of leverage at a certain scale, because in the end, there's so much time wasted by all these companies kind of standing up their hiring process and building out the team and deciding, what are the best practices to follow. All that is just wasted time and wasted runway. I think at a certain point, it becomes a lot more scalable, because it basically becomes a full-on school that's churning out people with this way of working, similar to like a boot camp would.
Well, as you step out on the balcony and you look across all that you have created, what are you most proud of?
Creating connections between the opportunities at startups and really talented people around the world, because that's one of the things that we've been focused on, is unlocking these kind of emerging tech talent in emerging countries. The country of Georgia is one that we've been working with a lot of really talented software engineers. It's not typically on the radar. And Brazil is another one that we've been working with pretty extensively over the last 6 or 8 months. I'm really proud of just being able to connect, tech entrepreneurs with really eager and loyal and talented people that wouldn't normally get to build things like this. So that to me is one of the most satisfying pieces.
Well, let's flip the script a little bit. Tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
One would be the first tech lead that I was bringing on to kind of be my first clone, did the classic mistake of pulling back too much too soon. One important thing as a company is scaling is that they need to rearrange the organization pretty rapidly and sometimes frequently. But what's the actual process for doing that in the way that can be as smooth as possible? And so to get really specifically, essentially, this tech leader that was replacing me hadn't really been cloned fully enough and didn't have the full set of context that they needed to really be a strong partner with the product owner. And I think that's another key differentiator about how we work. And what we do is that engineering is not just a resource to the product or the business. It's actually like a peer and a partner. To do that, it requires a lot of context to be able to make decisions and have opinions around tech and how it relates to the business specifically. All that to say, a decision was made that essentially didn't take into the full picture or a full enough picture that resulted in some technical debt that didn't need to be taken on. Built a piece of software or a feature that didn't really need to be built in that moment. And it came down to not having ramped up enough context to that technical leader. So we spend a lot of time now making sure that we're shadowing the new tech leader on the old tech leader if we're ever transitioning or as we're scaling people to new projects. That transition and that on-ramp and onboarding process is somewhere we spend a lot more focus on now.
What does the future look like for tech leaders for, your product, right, which is the scalable products and teams, and for your team itself?
The way I see it is, taking ultimately what kind of the Y Combinator approach does, where it creates an ecosystem of funding and expertise, but actually taking it a step further and actually offering done-for-you services. And I think at Digit, one of our investors was Google Ventures, and they kind of started to play with this a little bit with the design sprints. This is where they're actually, the advisors and people with the firm are in the company, not just like a high-level advisor, but actually really thinking deeply about the product themselves and actually helping do things. You see a lot of these big VC firms are starting to do this in some ways already, and we just want to really take that up a notch and do it even further, because there's a lot of expertise in the industry that isn't really like properly utilized because this model really hasn't been used.
Well, Todd, let's switch to you. Who influences the way that you work? Name a person you look up to and why.
I keep my idols kind of moving. I've got like a vision document where I write this down. It's always kind of a moving target. And so I like to think of it as certain traits. So there's certain people that have certain traits that I really like to embody. Naval Ravikant is one. That's a pretty big name. Shamath Palpatana is another one that I really like kind of certain traits of him. Bob Proctor is another one. He's more like a mindset coach, if you're familiar with him. So they're not all necessarily tech people, but I like to think of certain traits, and there's certain people in my career that I worked with at certain times where I like certain traits of them. So I like to kind of wrap it all up into kind of a super identity of sorts.
Well, we talked about a mistake, but a little bit different spin. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently? Or where would you consider taking a different approach?
Early when I started scaling, just doing what I was doing myself, I took for granted what we did differently and the decision making and the product strategy that we do that a lot of places don't do. And so we're just kind of like doing it naturally just because it was just how we worked. The more we talked with clients and other like kind of partner agencies and such, we realized like how different that actually was. So I would say, the biggest mistake was not leaning into kind of what made us unique. And then that is really what I've realized is like kind of one of the biggest problems that, the tech industry faces in general, which is kind of the strong people skills and the strong alignment with the business side of things.
Well, Todd, last question. So you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. Can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person having gone down this road a bit?
I think the biggest thing is to focus and niche down and decide, exactly who you're going to serve. I mean, I think it's the biggest sort of trap of any early entrepreneur is to try to go wide. Often out of like fear of, just committing to one thing and one thing only. But the power of focus and power of niching down and doing just one thing is incredible. And so I would say, even if it feels uncomfortable, it's the important thing to do as early as possible.
That's great advice. Well, Todd, thanks for being on the show today, and thanks for telling the creation story of tech leaders.
Hey, thank you, Noah. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. Support the show on patreon.com/codestory for just $5 to $10 a month. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Now Taxes is 100% free when you file in the TurboTax app if you didn't file with us last year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, just do your own taxes in the app by 2/18.
What if I have lots of forms?
All good, all 100% free.
What if I had 3 jobs?
Still 100% free.
What if I once saw Bigfoot?
That has nothing to do with taxes, so still 100% free.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Now this is Taxes. See if you qualify in the TurboTax app. Excludes TurboTax Live, must start and file in app by 2/18.